This is Rendezvous with the Ramey family. The girls and I are a throuple on board our Alberg 30 Liberty car. We're exploring the West Coast and all the Channel Islands. This is Chapter 1. We're dropping our hooks in all the cool spots as we save up every penny to move on board our forever boat. Welcome aboard. The girls and I made the 4-hour drive from Fresno, California to Ventura, California to take a look at the Alberg 30 our friend Jeff was about to list for sale. He and I knew each other from sailing on Millerton Lake together.
Hey, I like to have an Amazon hub.
And he knew I wanted to make the leap from the lake to the ocean. So he told me about the boat before he made it public to give me a chance at it first. And it was an offer I couldn't really refuse.
Jeff, turn off an Amber.
The entire time I was refitting Risque and sailing around Millerton Lake in my little fishbowl, Jeff had outgrown the lake and eventually got on board this 1979 Alberg 30. While I was growing more and more tired of Millerton Lake, I was reading Jeff's blog, Adventure Away. I read all his posts about him purchasing the boat, which was named Sky Mist at the time. Over the course of several months, I learned how he had sailed at 2 marinas for serious refits that included new electrical, new communications equipment, and a furling head sail, a new paint job, and Dodger, amongst other things. Eventually, Jeff got the boat from Ventura Harbor Marina out to sea through the San Francisco Bay, and then sailed it for days, past Point Conception and down to Ventura Harbor Marina, where he's been for a while, and I've been reading about it and drooling in jealousy. Looking back on those blog posts during his ownership of the boat was great for me, as I knew the honest condition of the boat before I even saw it. I knew this was more of a hidden gem type boat that are few and far between on the West Coast, and there was a solid chance that this one in particular was in the best condition of them all. Because I had his blog, and I knew Jeff personally, I felt okay not paying for a boat survey to be done, something I wouldn't recommend for anyone else in the purchasing process. The boat looked great, and this is the very first time we ever saw her in person. The very first thing I noticed was the difference 5 feet makes. My Coronado 25 seems so much smaller than this Alberg 30, even though it's just 5 feet of difference. When I got on board and below deck, the very first thing I noticed was that its layout was very plain, straightforward, and uncomplicated. Not even a gimbaled cooktop. Not even an electric fridge or freezer. Below deck seemed to be for retreating out of the elements when not on watch or for sleeping in general. It was not comfortable or inviting in any way that you would want it to be if you spent all your time on board. The other thing I noticed almost at the same time was that everyone else could stand up below deck except for me, as usual. Not being able to stand up straight below deck means doing anything down there is a constant battle with my lower back. This was almost an instant deal breaker for me. I didn't say anything yet as we still had to do the test sail, and to be honest, I was really rooting for this to work out.
Amber, here we go.
We're going.
I watched the girls grab 2 spots on the foredeck, and I remember thinking to myself, the last time Brittany was on a boat in the ocean was when we were getting our ASA certification on the East Coast on the Chesapeake Bay. I thought about how far Brittany and I have come as a couple. I have never lived a normal life. Whether it was a Marine, a biker, and now a sailor. She was right there through it all, no matter what. It's one of my favorite things about her, and it's a quality that's beyond rare. When her and I opened our relationship up to Amber, the two of us were already well on our way down the path to being full-time sailors on board a floating home. But before being in our family, Amber had never even thought about being on a sailboat before. As a matter of fact, even though this is Brittany's only second time being on a boat in the ocean, this is Amber's very first time. She had been on Risque. It's very hard to get seasick on the lake.
Out to open waters, Amber.
But Amber, believe it or not, is so prone to motion sickness that she'll get seasick in an elevator. So for us, this is the moment where we all get to find out if going on an adventure with us is going to be full of laughter or full of nausea.
What do you think, Amber?
So far so good. Yeah.
Pretty. Barely leaving the
We're barely
harbor.
leaving. Last me in like 20 minutes.
The weather was beautiful, but the wind was absent. I listened to the engine running, and she sounded like she could run forever with no issues. Liberty Call glided through the water like a knife through butter. I put the sails up just to see how smooth the lines ran, even though there was no wind. And I was happy to see that everything worked exactly the way it should, and all the lines ran back to the cockpit. The mast had lazy jacks, which means the Alberg 30 was very easy to solo sail, especially with the tiller pilot. But even in the calmest weather I've ever seen on the Pacific Ocean, and swells as small as they were, it got to Amber anyway. So I asked her, when she felt miserable, what she thought about the boat.
Amber,
So good.
you're a different color.
I know two things about Amber. One, she's absolutely miserable, and so far is not enjoying this.
A little bit paler.
I'm not feeling good.
And two, she's more of a warrior than almost anyone I've ever met, and that includes my time in the Marine Corps, overseas, in Iraq, and the entire decade I was in that motorcycle club. She doesn't quit anything once she puts her mind to it.
But I get sick running marathons, so.
And I knew, perhaps before she even knew, that seasickness wasn't going to stop her. I had faith in Amber the way that Brittany has faith in me. But I definitely didn't want to push my luck before asking the girls about whether or not we should spend money on this boat while they were miserable and sick, so we headed straight back to the slip.
I'm not having fun sailing around in circles on Millerton Lake anymore. So what I've decided to do is find a boat that I can take offshore. So it's got to be sturdy enough to get offshore, but cheap enough for me to stay on track sailing, or cheap enough for me to stay on track while sailing towards an island packet. So the only way I can do that is to find a blue water boat that's cheap enough but also maintained enough that it's not going to break down and become a money pit. Boats cost money even if they're well kept. Just to maintain them, it costs money. Slip fees cost money. So I have to fit this all into my monthly budget without touching my investing money. So I need to get a boat that is turnkey but cheap, and that's a really fine line to walk.
You'll notice that all of the criteria I just talked about, comfort was not one of them. As a matter of fact, this boat's purpose is to develop our sailing skills as a family before we move on to our forever boat. So as long as it doesn't take me out of my budget, and as long as it's turnkey enough that I don't have to dump any money into a refit, then I don't care if it's uncomfortable. If the interior below deck is not the best place to be on board, then it means that people will spend more time in the cockpit where they belong, learning how to sail. The Marine Corps taught me comfort is an illusion. It narrows the mind, weakens the body. It breeds complacency, and complacency kills. Maybe I can use that mindset with this boat. I don't need comfort, I need adventure. The capabilities of the boat, the finances, and the budget I needed it to stay in all lined up. With the girls' blessing, I shook Jeff's hand and became the new captain of Liberty Call.
Look, there's our new boat.